I found my fiancée's love letters to my father the night before our wedding, so I decided to read them aloud during my vows. Welcome to Revenge Galore. If you crave real gripping stories where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished, this channel is your new favorite place. Please subscribe. My name is Richard Davison, and 24 hours ago, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. I'm 31 years old, a senior project manager at Apex Financial Services in downtown Seattle, pulling in a comfortable six-figure salary that allowed me to afford the kind of life I'd always dreamed of. My corner office overlooked Elliott Bay, my BMW sat in reserved parking, and my 2,500 square foot condo in Belltown was everything a successful professional could want. But none of that mattered compared to what I thought I had with Isabella Martinez. Isabella was everything I'd never known I was looking for. At 29, she worked as a senior marketing coordinator for Northwest Healthcare Systems, managing campaigns that promoted wellness initiatives across the Pacific Northwest. We'd met 18 months ago at a charity gala for Seattle Children's Hospital, where I was representing Apex's corporate sponsorship and she was coordinating the event's marketing outreach. She'd approached me during the cocktail hour, commenting on how my company's financial literacy program for low-income families was exactly the kind of initiative that could change lives. 3 hours later, we were still talking over wine at a quiet bar in Pioneer Square, discussing everything from sustainable business practices to our shared love of hiking the Cascade Mountains. Isabella had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. She asked thoughtful questions, remembered details from previous conversations, and genuinely cared about the work we were both doing. When she laughed, which was often, her whole face lit up in a way that made everyone around her smile. Within 6 months, she'd moved into my condo. Within a year, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. The engagement ring, a 2.5-carat princess-cut diamond that cost 3 months of my salary, had been burning a hole in my safe for 2 months before I finally proposed during a weekend trip to Victoria, British Columbia. She said yes before I'd even finished asking. But Isabella wasn't just perfect for me, she was perfect for my family. And that, as it turned out, was the problem. My father, Robert Davison, was 62 years old and everything I aspired to become. He'd built Davison Construction from a two-man operation into one of the most respected commercial construction companies in the Pacific Northwest. His projects included office towers, hospital expansions, and mixed-use developments that had helped reshape Seattle's skyline over the past 3 decades. Robert was the kind of man who commanded respect without demanding it. 6 feet tall with silver hair that he kept perfectly styled, he dressed in tailored suits during the week and expensive casual wear on weekends. He'd been married to my mother, Patricia, for 35 years, and their relationship was the gold standard I measured all others against. When I introduced Isabella to my parents 8 months ago, Robert had been immediately charmed. "Son," he'd said after our first family dinner, "you've found yourself a real winner. Smart, beautiful, and she actually listens when people talk. Don't let this one get away." My mother, Patricia, had been equally enthusiastic, immediately including Isabella in family traditions and holiday celebrations. Patricia worked as a pediatric nurse at Swedish Medical Center and had always wanted a daughter. Isabella filled that role perfectly, joining my mother for shopping trips, spa days, and the kind of mother-daughter bonding I'd never seen Patricia enjoy with anyone else. The three of them had become inseparable over the past several months, with Isabella often visiting my parents' house in Mercer Island even when I was traveling for work. She'd help my mother plan dinner parties, assist my father with small design decisions for his construction projects, and had even convinced them to join her for weekend hiking trips in the Olympics. "You're so lucky to have such an amazing family," Isabella would tell me regularly. "Your parents treat me like I've been part of the family for years." Our wedding was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in downtown Seattle. We'd booked the Spanish ballroom for the ceremony and reception, expecting 180 guests including family, friends, colleagues, and clients from both our professional networks. The guest list read like a who's who of Seattle's business and social communities, executives from major corporations, healthcare industry leaders, and construction professionals who'd worked with my father for decades. Isabella had spent months planning every detail. She'd chosen a classic off-the-shoulder gown from a boutique in Beverly Hills, selected a menu that featured Pacific Northwest salmon and locally sourced vegetables, and hired a jazz quartet that specialized in jazz standards from the 1940s and 50s. The flowers were white roses and eucalyptus. The photography was being handled by the same woman who'd shot my cousin's wedding in Napa Valley, and the honeymoon was planned for 2 weeks in Italy. My father had insisted on paying for the rehearsal dinner at the Seattle Yacht Club, claiming it was his privilege as the father of the groom. My mother had organized the bachelor and bachelorette parties, coordinating with Isabella's sister to ensure both events would be memorable but tasteful. Even my typically reserved parents had gotten swept up in the excitement of planning what they called the wedding of the century. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, as I was about to discover. The night before our wedding, I was staying at the Fairmont Olympic in a suite 2 floors below the Spanish ballroom where our ceremony would take place. Isabella was spending the night at a spa resort in Snoqualmie with her bridesmaids, following the tradition of not seeing each other before the wedding. My father had insisted on staying at the hotel as well, claiming he wanted to be available if any last-minute logistics needed attention. We'd spent the evening going over final details, the timeline for photos, the seating chart for elderly relatives, and the backup plan in case the weather didn't cooperate for our planned outdoor cocktail hour. Robert had been in full father-of-the-groom mode, making calls to vendors, checking on flower deliveries, and ensuring that every aspect of the weekend would exceed expectations. Around 11:30 p.m., my father had gone to his room to make some final calls about a construction project that was supposed to break ground the following Monday. I was reviewing my vows one last time when I realized I'd left my phone charger in my father's suite during our earlier planning session. I knocked on his door, but there was no answer. I could hear the shower running, so I used the spare key card he'd given me earlier and let myself in to retrieve my charger. That's when I saw them. Scattered across the desk in his suite were handwritten letters on Isabella's distinctive cream-colored stationery, the same paper she used for thank-you notes and personal correspondence. The hotel room's lighting cast everything in sharp relief, and I could clearly see Isabella's flowing handwriting covering page after page. I shouldn't have read them. I knew that even as I picked up the first letter. But something about seeing Isabella's personal stationery in my father's hotel room 12 hours before our wedding made my stomach turn with a dread I couldn't ignore. The first letter was dated 3 weeks ago. My dearest Robert, I can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon at the construction site. The way you kissed me against the wall of that unfinished office space, with the afternoon light streaming through the windows, it was like something out of a movie. I keep replaying the moment when you whispered that you'd been thinking about me since the day Richard first brought me home. The guilt is eating me alive, but I can't deny what I feel for you. You're everything Richard isn't: confident, experienced, powerful in a way that makes me feel completely feminine and desired. When you touch me, I forget everything else exists. I know we said this was temporary, just something to get out of our systems before the wedding. But Robert, I don't think I can marry your son knowing what we've shared. How can I stand at that altar and promise to love Richard forever when my heart belongs to you? Tell me what to do. Tell me we can find a way to be together without destroying everyone we care about. All my love, Isabella. My hands were shaking as I read the letter. The shower was still running in the bathroom, giving me time to read the others. Each one was worse than the last. 3 months ago, Robert, thank you for the most incredible weekend of my life. Telling Richard the first was visiting my sister in Portland while we were actually in that cabin on Hood Canal was perfect. I've never felt so alive, so wanted, so completely myself as I do when I'm with you. 2 months ago, I tried on my wedding dress today, and all I could think about was how much I wished I was marrying you instead of Richard. I know you're worried about Patricia finding out, but surely there's a way we can make this work. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. 1 month ago, the way you looked at me during last night's rehearsal dinner planning meeting made me weak in the knees. Patricia was sitting right there, talking about flower arrangements, and you were undressing me with your eyes. It took everything I had not to kiss you right there at the dining room table. 2 weeks ago, I can't believe we're going through with this charade. Walking down that aisle to marry Richard while knowing I belong to you feels like the cruelest joke imaginable. But you're right, after the wedding, after the honeymoon, we can figure out how to be together properly. Richard will never suspect anything. 1 week ago, our time at the hotel yesterday was perfect. The way you made love to me, the way you told me you'd been dreaming about our future together, it made everything clear. I'm going to marry Richard because we have to keep up appearances for now, but my heart, my body, my soul belong to you. Always. The final letter was dated yesterday. My beloved Robert, tomorrow I marry your son, but tonight I'm yours completely. Thank you for making these past 6 months the most passionate, exciting, intense experience of my life. You've shown me what real desire feels like, what it means to be truly wanted by a man who knows how to take what he wants. I know we agreed to be careful after the wedding, to wait until the time is right to tell Richard and Patricia the truth. But I'm not sure I can pretend anymore. When I look at Richard, I see a boy. When I look at you, I see the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. After the honeymoon, when things settle down, let's find our moment. I'm ready to leave Richard for you, ready to face whatever consequences come with following our hearts. Until tomorrow, when I'll be thinking of you while I say vows meant for you. Your Isabella. I set the letters down and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline while trying to process what I just read. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single mistake. This was a calculated, ongoing affair that had been happening for 6 months. Since before our engagement. Since the first time Isabella had visited my parents' house. They had planned to continue the affair after our marriage. Isabella was going to walk down that aisle tomorrow, promise to love and honor me, and then go to Italy for our honeymoon while planning to leave me for my own father. The shower was still running. I took photos of every letter with my phone, making sure the handwriting, dates, and content were clearly visible. Then I carefully arranged them exactly as I'd found them and left the suite. Back in my own room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the photos on my phone. Part of me wanted to believe this was some kind of elaborate joke or misunderstanding. But Isabella's handwriting was unmistakable, and the intimate details in the letters left no room for doubt. My fiancé and my father had been having an affair for half our relationship. They had been planning to destroy my marriage before it even began. And tomorrow, in front of 180 guests, they were going to complete their deception by letting me marry a woman who was already committed to another man, my own father. I could have confronted them immediately. I could have canceled the wedding, demanded explanations, and handled this privately. But something in those letters, some combination of their arrogance and their assumption that I would never discover the truth, made me decide on a different course of action. If they wanted to make a mockery of marriage vows and family loyalty, I was going to give them the most public platform possible to face the consequences of their choices. I was going to let them destroy themselves in front of everyone who mattered to them. The first call I made was to my attorney, Michael Jones, who had handled my real estate transactions and business contracts for the past 5 years. Michael was a partner at one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms, and more importantly, he was someone I trusted completely. Richard, Michael answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Isn't tomorrow your wedding day? Why are you calling me at midnight? I explained the situation, reading him excerpts from the letters and detailing my discovery. Michael listened without interruption, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Richard. I'm sorry this happened to you. But I'm glad you're thinking clearly enough to call me. What you're planning, exposing them publicly at the wedding, it's not illegal, but we need to make sure you're protected. Michael's advice was straightforward. Document everything, don't sign any marriage documents, and make sure I had witnesses to the evidence. He also recommended that I consider having him present at the wedding as my legal representative, positioned discreetly among the guests in case the situation escalated beyond my control. Sometimes, Michael said, the truth is the most powerful weapon you can use. And sometimes people destroy themselves more effectively than any revenge you could plan. My second call was to James Rodriguez, my best man and closest friend since college. James worked as a senior software engineer at Microsoft and had been the one person I'd confided in about everything from career decisions to relationship doubts. If anyone could help me execute what I was planning, it was James. Rich, do you know what time it is? James answered groggily. James, I need your help with something urgent. Can you meet me in my hotel room? And bring your laptop. 20 minutes later, James was sitting at the desk in my suite, reading the photos of Isabella's letters while I explained what I'd discovered and what I was planning to do about it. Holy shit, James said when he finished reading. Your dad and Isabella? That's beyond fucked up, man. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? You could just call off the wedding and handle this privately. James, they were planning to let me marry her knowing this was going on. They were going to let me stand up there tomorrow and promise to love and honor a woman who's been sleeping with my father for 6 months. They think I'm too stupid or too trusting to ever find out. James nodded slowly. Okay. What do you need me to do? We spent the next 2 hours creating what James called the evidence package. Using his laptop in the hotel's business center, we designed a simple website that displayed all of Isabella's letters alongside a brief explanation of what they represented. The site was clean, professional, and devastating in its simplicity. Next, we created QR codes that would direct people to the website. James suggested making them look like legitimate wedding materials, digital guest books or photo-sharing links that guests would naturally want to scan. We designed elegant cards that read, "Scan to see a special message from the bride and groom," and included both our names and the wedding date. The beauty of this approach, James explained, is that once people start scanning these codes, the information will spread organically. People will share the link, take screenshots, and discuss it with other guests. By the time you actually reveal what's happening, half the room will already know. We printed 200 cards using the hotel's business center, making them look professional and legitimate. To anyone who didn't know better, they would appear to be exactly the kind of modern touch that tech-savvy couples include in their wedding materials. My third call was to Sarah Mitchell, our wedding coordinator. Sarah had planned dozens of high-profile weddings in Seattle and was known for her discretion and professionalism. If anyone could help me execute this plan without disrupting the ceremony's logistics, it was Sarah. "Richard, honey, what are you doing awake? Tomorrow's your big day." I explained that I needed to make a change to the ceremony, specifically, that I wanted to read something special during my vows, and I needed her help distributing some materials to the guests beforehand. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you need to make your day perfect." Sarah agreed to have her assistants distribute the QR code cards to guests as they arrived for the ceremony, presenting them as a special surprise from the bride and groom. She assumed they were some kind of romantic gesture or digital keepsake, which was exactly what I wanted her to think. By 4 a.m., everything was in place. The website was live, the cards were printed, and the people I needed were positioned to help execute the plan. All that remained was to get through the next 12 hours while maintaining the appearance that everything was normal. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "Good morning, my almost husband. I can't wait to see you at the altar today. I love you so much and I can't wait to start our life together. Red heart." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. While she was sending me love messages, the letters to my father were still sitting in his hotel suite, documenting her plans to leave me for him after our honeymoon. I texted back, "I love you too. Today is going to be unforgettable." That, at least, was true. At 8 a.m., I had breakfast with my father in the hotel restaurant. Robert was in an excellent mood, talking excitedly about the ceremony and how proud he was to be gaining Isabella as a daughter-in-law. "She's special, son," he said over coffee and eggs Benedict. "You're getting the kind of woman most men only dream about. Beautiful, intelligent, caring, she's going to make you very happy." I watched him speak, studying his face for any sign of guilt or deception. There was none. He was either a better actor than I'd given him credit for, or he genuinely believed he could compartmentalize his affair with my fiancée from his role as my father. "I'm a lucky man," I agreed. "Isabella and I are going to have an amazing life together." Robert raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To new beginnings." "To truth," I countered, clinking my cup against his. At 10 a.m., I called my mother to check in before the ceremony preparations began. Patricia was at the spa with Isabella and the bridesmaids, helping with hair and makeup for the bridal party. "Richard, sweetheart, everything is perfect here," my mother said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Isabella looks absolutely radiant. You're going to cry when you see her walking down that aisle." "I'm sure I will," I said. "Mom, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you and Dad have done for us. This wedding, this whole experience, it means everything to me." "Oh, honey," Patricia's voice became emotional. "You're our only child. Seeing you happy, seeing you with someone as wonderful as Isabella, it's all your father and I have ever wanted." The irony was crushing. My mother was celebrating what she thought was the happiest day of her son's life, completely unaware that her husband had been betraying both of us for months. At 2 p.m., guests began arriving at the Fairmont Olympic. The Spanish ballroom had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale, with white roses, flowing fabric and soft lighting that made everything look magical. The jazz quartet was setting up near the altar, and the photographer was capturing candid shots of family and friends as they found their seats. I watched from a side room as Sarah Mitchell's team distributed the QR code cards to guests. They presented them exactly as we'd planned, as a special surprise from the bride and groom that would enhance the wedding experience. Guests accepted them eagerly, and within minutes I could see people scanning the codes with their phones. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Uncle Frank from Portland scanned his code first, and I watched his expression change from curiosity to shock to horror in about 15 seconds. He showed his phone to Aunt Margaret, who gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. The information spread like wildfire. Guests started whispering urgently to each other, passing phones around, and scanning their own codes to confirm what they were seeing. Within 20 minutes, nearly everyone in the ballroom had seen Isabella's letters to my father. My boss from Apex Financial, David Lawson, went pale as he read the evidence. Isabella's colleagues from Northwest Healthcare looked stunned as they processed what they were seeing. Even the jazz quartet had stopped their sound check to stare at their phones in disbelief. But the ceremony preparations continued. Isabella and the bridal party were still upstairs getting ready, completely unaware that their secret had been exposed to every wedding guest. My father was greeting relatives and family friends, not noticing that their conversations were more subdued than usual and their glances in his direction had become uncomfortable. At 3:30 p.m., my mother appeared beside me, her face pale and her hands shaking. She was holding her phone, and I could see Isabella's letters displayed on the screen. "Richard," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please tell me this isn't real." I looked at my mother, this strong, loving woman who had spent 35 years building a life with a man who had betrayed her in the most fundamental way possible, and felt my heart break for her. "I'm sorry, Mom. I found the actual letters in Dad's hotel room last night. The handwriting is Isabella's, the details are specific, and the timeline matches their behavior over the past 6 months." Patricia stared at the phone screen, reading the letters again as if hoping they would somehow change. When she looked back at me, her eyes were filled with tears. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell the truth," I said simply. "In front of everyone. Right here, right now." My mother nodded slowly. "Good," she said, her voice gaining strength. "They deserve to face the consequences of what they've done." At 4 p.m., the ceremony was scheduled to begin. Isabella appeared at the back of the ballroom in her $15,000 wedding gown, looking absolutely stunning and completely confident. She had no idea that every guest in the room had just finished reading love letters she'd written to her future father-in-law. My father took his position in the front row, straightening his tie and smiling proudly. He also had no idea that his secret was already public knowledge among everyone who mattered to him professionally and personally. The music began. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle. Isabella's sister Sarah, serving as maid of honor, looked nervous but excited. James, my best man, caught my eye and nodded slightly, our signal that everything was ready. Then Isabella began her walk down the aisle. She looked radiant, confident, and completely at peace with what she was about to do. The woman who had been planning to marry me while already committed to my father walked toward the altar with the same serene smile she'd worn when she said yes to my proposal. As she reached the altar, I could see confusion beginning to creep into her expression. The guests were too quiet, their faces too serious for a joyful wedding ceremony. But she couldn't yet process what was wrong. Father Murphy, who had officiated dozens of society weddings at the Fairmont Olympic, began the ceremony with the traditional opening words. The ballroom was silent except for his voice and the occasional whispered conversation among guests who were still processing what they'd learned. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Richard Davison and Isabella Martinez in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred bond, built on trust, honesty, and fidelity between two people who choose to share their lives completely with each other." The irony of his words was not lost on anyone in the room. Father Murphy continued with the traditional language about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of the vows we were about to exchange. As he spoke, I watched Isabella's face, waiting for the moment when she would realize that something was fundamentally wrong. That moment came when Father Murphy reached the traditional question: "If any person present knows of any lawful impediment why Richard and Isabella may not be joined in marriage, let them speak now or forever hold their peace." I stepped forward and took the microphone from Father Murphy. "Yes," I said, my voice carrying clearly throughout the ballroom. "I have something to say." The silence was absolute. Isabella turned to face me, and I could see the exact moment when she realized that her perfect plan was about to collapse. "I want to thank everyone for being here today to witness what I thought would be the happiest day of my life," I began, my voice steady and controlled. "I also want to thank you for your patience as I share some information that I believe is relevant to this ceremony." I reached into my jacket and pulled out printed copies of Isabella's letters, the originals I had photographed in my father's hotel room. Last night I discovered these letters in my father's hotel room. They're written in Isabella's handwriting, on her personal stationery, and they document a 6-month affair between my bride-to-be and my own father. The gasps from the guests were audible throughout the ballroom. Isabella's face went white as she realized what was happening. My father half stood from his seat, his expression changing from confusion to panic as he understood that his secret was no longer secret. Rather than paraphrase their contents, I continued, I thought I'd share Isabella's own words about her feelings for my father and their plans for our marriage. I began reading from the most recent letter. "Tomorrow I marry your son, but tonight I'm yours completely. Thank you for making these past 6 months the most passionate, exciting, intense experience of my life." Isabella tried to speak, but no words came out. She was staring at me with a look of pure terror, finally understanding that her deception had been completely exposed. I continued reading. "When I look at Richard, I see a boy. When I look at you, I see the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. After the honeymoon, when things settle down, let's find our moment. I'm ready to leave Richard for you." My father was now standing, his hands shaking as he tried to figure out how to salvage the situation. But there was nothing to salvage. The evidence was undeniable, the audience was captivated, and the truth was finally being told. "And finally," I said, reading from the letter dated 3 weeks ago, "the guilt is eating me alive, but I can't deny what I feel for you. You're everything Richard isn't: confident, experienced, powerful in a way that makes me feel completely feminine and desired." I lowered the letters and looked directly at Isabella, then at my father. "So, Isabella, while I appreciate your assessment of my shortcomings compared to my father, I think I'll pass on marrying someone who's already committed to another man. And Dad, congratulations on winning the woman of your dreams. I hope she's worth destroying your marriage, your relationship with your son, and your reputation in the community." The chaos that erupted was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. Isabella was sobbing hysterically, trying to explain herself to anyone who would listen. My father was attempting to push through the crowd of guests to reach me, shouting something about misunderstandings and explanations. My mother was being comforted by her sister and several family friends, but her grief was visible to everyone in the room. Guests were on their phones, taking videos, sharing the story on social media, and discussing what they had just witnessed. The wedding photographer, apparently deciding this was still newsworthy, continued taking pictures of the aftermath. I walked down the aisle and out of the Spanish ballroom, leaving behind the 2 people who had betrayed my trust and destroyed my family. As I exited, I could hear Isabella calling my name, begging me to let her explain. But there was nothing to explain. Her own words had already told the entire story. In the hotel lobby, James caught up with me. "Jesus, Rich. That was intense. How are you holding up?" I looked at my best man, the one person who had helped me execute the most important project of my life, and realized that for the first time in months, I felt completely honest about my situation. "I'm better than I've been in a long time," I told him. "The truth has a way of setting you free even when it hurts." Within hours, the story had spread far beyond the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Several guests had shared videos and photos on social media, and by evening, the story was trending on Twitter and Instagram. Local Seattle news stations picked it up by Sunday morning, and by Monday I was fielding calls from national media outlets wanting to interview me about the wedding that went viral for all the wrong reasons. I declined most interview requests, but I did speak with one reporter from the Seattle Times who had covered business stories about Apex Financial in the past. I kept my comments brief and dignified. "I believe in the truth," I said. "And I believe that people have the right to know who they're really dealing with, especially when it comes to matters of trust and integrity." The professional consequences for Isabella and my father were swift and devastating. Northwest Healthcare Systems, which prided itself on family values and ethical business practices, terminated Isabella's employment within a week. The scandal had become so widely known that having her associated with their brand was seen as a liability for a healthcare organization. My father's construction business suffered even more dramatically. In an industry built entirely on trust and personal relationships, his reputation was essentially destroyed overnight. 3 major clients canceled their contracts within days of the wedding incident, citing concerns about character and judgment. His business partner of 20 years dissolved their partnership, and several subcontractors who had worked exclusively with Davison Construction announced they would be seeking other opportunities. The social media coverage was relentless. #WeddingRevenge and #SeattleWeddingScandal trended for days, with thousands of people sharing opinions about betrayal, family loyalty, and public accountability. Most of the commentary was supportive of my decision to expose the truth, though some criticized the public nature of the revelation. My mother, Patricia, filed for divorce within 10 days of the wedding incident. She had been married to my father for 35 years, but she told me during one of our long conversations that the public humiliation and the violation of trust were impossible to overcome. "I could have maybe forgiven a private affair," she said during lunch at her sister's house in Bellevue. "But the fact that he was willing to destroy his own son's life, that he planned to let you marry her knowing what they had done, that's something I can never forgive." The legal proceedings were handled by Michael Jones, who had prepared for exactly this scenario. Since the marriage had never been legally completed, there were no divorce proceedings necessary between Isabella and me. However, there were financial matters to resolve. I had paid for most of the wedding expenses, including the venue, catering, flowers, and photography. While I couldn't recover all of the money, Michael was able to negotiate settlements that covered a significant portion of my losses. More importantly, he helped me ensure that Isabella had no legal claim to any of my property or savings. The honeymoon reservations were cancelled, the apartment lease was terminated early, and Isabella's belongings were removed from my condo by a moving company she hired. She never contacted me directly after the wedding day confrontation, communicating only through attorneys when necessary to resolve financial and property matters. 3 months after the wedding incident, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I accepted a job offer from a tech company in Austin, Texas. The opportunity had come through a professional connection who had seen the media coverage and was impressed by how I had handled the situation. "You showed real character," the hiring manager told me during our interview. "Not everyone would have had the strength to expose the truth like that, especially under such difficult circumstances." Austin offered me a senior director position with a substantial salary increase and the chance to work on innovative financial technology projects. The timing felt perfect for a fresh start away from the memories and the gossip that still followed me around Seattle. Before I left Washington, I had one final conversation with my father. He had been trying to reach me for weeks, but I had refused to take his calls. Finally, he showed up at my condo on a Saturday morning as I was packing, looking older and more defeated than I had ever seen him. "Son," he said, standing in my doorway, "I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I destroyed everything that mattered to me, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I looked at him, this man who had been my hero for 31 years, who had taught me about integrity and hard work, who had raised me to value honesty above all else, and felt something I hadn't expected to feel: pity. "Dad," I said, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying anger around is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my life." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I hope someday you can understand." "No," I interrupted. "I hope I never understand what could make someone betray their family like that. I hope I never become the kind of person who could rationalize that level of deception." I closed the door and finished packing. 2 days later, I was in Austin, starting over in a place where no one knew my story unless I chose to share it. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I was settled in Austin, working on projects that challenged me intellectually and surrounded by colleagues who knew nothing about my past except what I chose to reveal. I had started dating again, taking things slowly and being very careful about trust. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about reading people and recognizing red flags, skills that proved useful both personally and professionally. I heard through my mother that Isabella had moved back to her hometown in California to live with her parents, and that my father had taken a job as a project manager at a small construction company in Spokane. Their affair had ended almost immediately after the wedding incident, apparently unable to survive the harsh light of public scrutiny and social consequences. The scandal that had brought them together had ultimately destroyed them both. The passion they had written about so eloquently in their secret letters had evaporated the moment their deception was exposed to the people whose opinions mattered to them. My mother eventually began dating a widowed doctor from her hospital, and she seemed happier than I had seen her in years. "Sometimes," she told me during one of our weekly phone calls, "the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened." The story of my wedding day revenge had become something of a legend in Seattle social circles, but I rarely thought about it anymore. I had moved on to bigger and better things, and the betrayal that had once seemed like the end of the world had actually been the beginning of a new and better life. 1 year after the wedding incident, I received an unexpected message through LinkedIn from someone named Jennifer Walsh, who worked as a marketing director for a tech startup in Portland. Her message was brief but intriguing. "Hi Richard, I know this might seem strange, but I wanted to thank you for what you did at your wedding. Your story helped me find the courage to expose my own situation. I'd love to buy you coffee if you're ever in Portland." Curious, I agreed to meet Jennifer during a business trip to Oregon the following month. She turned out to be a confident, intelligent woman in her early 30s who had discovered her fiancé was embezzling money from the nonprofit where she worked. Instead of confronting him privately, she had used my example to expose his theft publicly at their engagement party, ensuring that he faced both legal and social consequences for his actions. "Your wedding day speech gave me the blueprint," she told me over coffee in downtown Portland. "You showed me that sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is simply telling the truth in the most public way possible." Jennifer's story made me realize something important. My decision to expose Isabella and my father hadn't just been about personal justice. It had become a symbol for other people who had been betrayed, manipulated, or deceived by those they trusted most. Over the following months, I heard from dozens of people who had been inspired by my story to take action in their own situations. A woman in Chicago had exposed her husband's affair with her sister at their family reunion. A man in Denver had revealed his business partner's embezzlement at their company's annual shareholders meeting. A college student in Boston had confronted her roommate's theft of her scholarship money at their graduation party. Each story reinforced the same lesson: betrayal thrives in darkness, but it cannot survive the light of truth. 2 years after my wedding day, I met someone who would change my life in ways I never expected. Dr. Amanda Chen was a pediatric surgeon at Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin, and we met at a charity fundraiser for childhood cancer research. She was brilliant, compassionate, and had the kind of strength that comes from saving children's lives for a living. What impressed me most about Amanda was her honesty. On our second date, she told me she'd heard about my Seattle wedding story through mutual friends and wanted me to know up front that she knew about my past. "I'm not interested in drama or secrets," she said during dinner at a quiet restaurant in downtown Austin. "I believe in direct communication, honest relationships, and treating people with respect. If those values align with yours, I'd like to keep seeing you. If not, we should probably stop here." I looked across the table at this remarkable woman who was offering me exactly what I'd thought I had with Isabella: genuine partnership based on truth and mutual respect. But this time I could tell the difference. "Those values definitely align with mine," I told her. "In fact, they're the only values I'm interested in anymore." Amanda and I were married 18 months later in a small ceremony at Zilker Park in Austin, with 30 close friends and family members in attendance. My mother flew in from Seattle, looking radiant and genuinely happy for the first time since my father's betrayal. James served as my best man again, joking that he hoped this wedding would be less eventful than the last one. There were no elaborate decorations, no expensive venues, no hundreds of guests. Just two people who had chosen each other based on honesty, respect, and genuine compatibility. Amanda's vows were simple and direct. "I promise to tell you the truth even when it's difficult. I promise to respect you even when we disagree. And I promise to choose you every day for the rest of our lives." My vows were equally straightforward. "I promise to trust you completely because you've earned that trust through your actions. I promise to support your dreams, even when they challenge me. And I promise to love you for who you really are, not who I want you to be." The difference between this wedding and the one that never happened was striking. Instead of elaborate performances and hidden agendas, we had authentic connection and mutual commitment. Instead of family drama and secret betrayals, we had honest relationships built on respect and communication. 3 years after my wedding day revenge, I received a phone call that brought the story full circle. It was from a producer at a major television network who wanted to feature my story in a documentary about public accountability and social media justice. "Your case has become something of a landmark," the producer explained. "Legal scholars are studying it as an example of how individuals can use truth-telling and public exposure to hold people accountable for betrayal and deception. We'd like to interview you about the decision-making process and the long-term consequences." I agreed to participate in the documentary, not because I wanted more attention, but because I believed the message was important. Betrayal, deception, and manipulation thrive when victims stay silent out of shame, embarrassment, or misplaced loyalty. But when the truth is exposed publicly, consequences follow naturally. The documentary aired 6 months later and generated renewed interest in my story. But by then I was focused on my new life with Amanda, my successful career in Austin, and the future we were building together. The final chapter of my revenge story came 4 years after the wedding incident. I received a letter from Isabella, forwarded through my attorney's office. She had tracked down my contact information and wanted to apologize for what she had done. "Richard," she wrote, "I know this letter is years too late, and I know there's nothing I can say that will undo the hurt I caused you and your family. But I need you to know that I've spent every day since our wedding regretting my choices and trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could betray someone who trusted me completely. The affair with your father wasn't about love or passion, despite what I wrote in those letters. It was about power and validation from someone who seemed more successful and sophisticated than anyone I'd ever known. I was weak, selfish, and cruel, and I destroyed 3 lives because I was too cowardly to be honest about what I really wanted. You were right to expose us publicly. The consequences we faced were exactly what we deserved for the pain we caused. I hope you found happiness with someone who appreciates your integrity and treats you with the respect you always deserved." I read the letter once, showed it to Amanda, and then filed it away. Isabella's apology was genuine, but it was also irrelevant. The person who had been hurt by her betrayal no longer existed. I had become someone stronger, wiser, and more careful about trust. but also someone capable of genuine happiness with the right partner. My father never contacted me directly, but I heard through my mother that he had eventually remarried and was trying to rebuild his construction business in Eastern Washington. Patricia told me he asked about me occasionally, but he respected my decision to keep our relationship severed. Some bridges, my mother said during one of our conversations, burn completely. And sometimes that's for the best. 5 years after my wedding day revenge, Amanda and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Grace. Holding her in the hospital room, I thought about the lessons I would teach her about relationships, trust, and standing up for truth. I would tell her that betrayal is always painful, but it doesn't have to be permanent. I would teach her that the right response to deception is honesty, not more deception. And I would show her through my example that it's possible to recover from even the most devastating betrayals and build something better than what was destroyed. Most importantly, I would teach her that the people who truly love you will never ask you to compromise your integrity or accept less than you deserve. The right person will value your trust as the precious gift it is and will never give you reason to doubt their commitment. My name is Richard Davison, and my wedding day revenge became the foundation for a life built on authentic relationships and genuine happiness. The betrayal that nearly destroyed me actually saved me from a marriage that would have been built on lies and a family relationship that was already poisoned by deception. Sometimes the most devastating moments in our lives turn out to be the ones that set us free to find what we really deserve. My wedding day didn't end with the marriage I thought I wanted. It ended with the truth that led me to everything I actually needed. The quiet son who was betrayed by his father and fiancée became the man who refused to accept deception as the price of keeping peace. The victim of elaborate lies became someone who values truth above comfort and integrity above convenience. And the wedding that was supposed to be the beginning of a life built on secrets became the moment when I learned that the most powerful weapon against betrayal is simply telling the truth, publicly and without apology. That's the real lesson here. When people show you who they really are through their actions, believe them. When they betray your trust in fundamental ways, don't protect them from the consequences of their choices. And when you have the opportunity to expose deception that affects not just you but everyone who cares about the people involved, choose truth over temporary peace. Because the truth doesn't just set you free, it protects everyone else from becoming the next victim of the same lies that nearly destroyed your life. The altar where I was supposed to pledge my life to a woman who had already given her heart to my father became the platform where I reclaimed my dignity and my future. The ceremony that was meant to celebrate love became a lesson about the power of honesty. And the wedding that ended in chaos and public humiliation for the betrayers became the beginning of a life where trust is earned, love is honest, and marriage is built on the foundation it was always meant to have, truth. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely was living a double life? How would you handle learning that your closest family member had betrayed you in the most fundamental way possible? Do you think public exposure is justified when private betrayal affects multiple innocent people? Let me know in the comments what you think about Richard's decision to turn his wedding into a truth-telling ceremony. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Revenge Galore for more stories where justice hits hard and betrayal never goes unpunished.